Hey, somebody needs to fly the flag. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. This week, The Professional Noticer is sponsored by Books for Veterans. Last year, the Veterans Administration in Washington, D.C. asked for 10,000 Andy Andrews books, and you made that happen. Well, we might have created a situation because now they say they'd like to have 10,000 more. So just like last year, I'm personally donating as many as I can, but to reach 10,000 again, I need your help. What we have now to make that whole process easier and even more fun for you are these awesome Books for Veterans t-shirts. When you purchase one of these t-shirts, a hardcover book will be sent to the Veterans Administration in your name. The shirt, of course, will come to you. And if you'd rather just donate the books, for every $12 donation you make, another hardcover, Traveler's Gift, Noticer, Heart Mender, 7 Decisions, or Butterfly Effect will go to the Veterans Administration for veterans, their families, and for employees of the VA. That $12 will cover the cost of the hardcover book, the shipping, handling, everything. So whether you can spread the message of Books for Veterans by wearing the t-shirt and telling people what we're doing, whether you can make this a personal gift or a corporate donation, just go to andyandrews.com/veterans. This can be added to a website purchase or done as an individual entry. And thank you so much for your support. All right, observations and answers. That's what we do here on The Professional Noticer. And today, the observations and answers are not coming from a guest. The observations and answers are going to be about one of our country's most special celebrations, Memorial Day. Today is Memorial Day. And so we thought this would be a great time to go into the history of it and let's explore some things that are not commonly known. Now, Memorial Day used to be called Decoration Day. And so when we're referring to this throughout, we might call it Decoration Day a couple of times, but we're going to pretty much call it Memorial Day, even though what we're referring to back in the history of this holiday was originally called, and for a long time called, Decoration Day. So there's a lot about this that seems to be kind of cloudy in people's memories, or maybe a gap in their knowledge about it. And as important as our veterans are, and as important as these Gold Star families are, these people who have lost loved ones to defense of our country, I think it's important that our families kind of be up on this and that we raise our children understanding why we celebrate this day and what this day is about. And so this is just a little overview if you are familiar with it, maybe a crash course on it if you're not. So here we go. In the years following this bitter Civil War, and the Civil War, as you know, is 1861 through 1865. But I'm just going to caution you, you're going to be surprised at where Memorial Day came from. Okay, but in the years following the Civil War, this was the most bitter time in our country, a former Union general took a holiday that had been originated by the wives of former Confederate soldiers. And this Union general took this thing these Confederate ladies had done and helped spread it across the entire country. That holiday was called Decoration Day. It was an annual event that was born in and around Columbus, Georgia in 1866, and it was adopted by the United States in 1868. It's a holiday in which America honors its military dead. Now, I'll just say, we've already mentioned a couple of dates. We've mentioned Columbus, Georgia. There are actually several cities around America who claim to be the origin place of Memorial Day. But those are because some politician wrote something and said, okay, I'm allowing you to be. Lyndon Johnson was one who wrote and said, yeah, this town gets to be the origin of Memorial Day. But it was really Columbus, Georgia. Now, the Union General, John Logan, after the war, he headed the largest Union veterans fraternity at that time. It was called the Grand Army of the Republic. And John Logan is usually credited as being the general, this peace-loving visionary who brought the idea to the entire nation. And when the general established that holiday, he acknowledged that its origin had been among the Union's former enemies. And he said it was not too late for the Union men of the nation to follow the example of the people of the South. During 1866, this first year of this annual observance in the South, a feature of that holiday emerged that made awareness, unbelievable admiration, and eventually imitation of it spread quickly to the North. During this inaugural Memorial Day observance, which was conceived in Columbus, Georgia, many Southern participants, especially the ladies, decorated the graves of Confederate soldiers, and unexpectedly, they also decorated the graves of their former enemies who fought for the Union. Because, as you know, North and South were buried all over the landscape. And so they were decorating these graves, which is why they called it Decoration Day. And so that was just one of those things that spur of the moment. Those ladies not only decorated the graves of their ancestors, but they decorated the graves of their former enemies. So shortly after those first Decoration Day observances all across the South, newspaper coverage in the North started to be very favorable to their ex-enemies. One of the quotes from a newspaper is, "The action of the ladies on this occasion in burying whatever animosities or ill feelings may have been engendered in the late war toward those who fought against them is worthy of all praise and commendation." That was from one newspaper. On May 9th in 1866, the Cleveland Daily Leader just heaped the accolades on these Southern women because of that first Memorial Day. And this is what they said: "The act was as beautiful as it was unselfish and will be appreciated in the North." The New York Commercial Advertiser recognized the attitude and the acts of these women in Columbus, Georgia, and echoed this party line at this point. Here's what they said. They said, "Let this incident, touching and beautiful as it is, impart to our Washington authorities a lesson in conciliation." Now, not everybody liked it. There's always somebody when you're trying to make up, trying to be friends again. So going, I'm not going to be their friend. And so, not everybody liked this reconciliation at first. Now, so to be sure, the acclaim for this new holiday, Decoration Day, was not unanimous. There were a lot of people in both parts of the U.S., North and South, who had no interest in repairing the war's wounds of the heart, right? But as a result of one of these news reports, a Northern judge, Francis Miles Finch, this guy was a judge, he was a scholar, he was a poet, and he wrote a poem titled "The Blue and the Gray." Well, Finch's poem quickly became a part of the American literary landscape. He explained what inspired him to write it by saying, "It struck me that the South was holding out a friendly hand, and that it was our duty, not only as the conquerors, but as men and women and fellow citizens of the nation to grasp that outstretched hand. So Finch's poem seemed to extend a full pardon to the South. There's a line in it that says, "They banish our anger forever when they laurel the graves of our dead." That was one of the lines. And almost immediately, this poem circulated across America in books and magazines and newspapers. And get this, by the end of the 19th century, school children everywhere hated this poem. No, I'm just kidding. By the end of the 19th century, well, they may have hated it, because by the end of the 19th century, school children all over America were required to memorize this poem. So I thought you would, knowing how much you probably liked poetry in school, like I did, I read this poem. I was doing this research and I read this poem, and I thought you might want to hear that too. This is what the kids had to memorize. This is what he wrote. This is The Blue and the Gray by Francis Miles Finch. By the flow of the inland river, whence the fleets of iron have fled, where the blades of the grave grass quiver, asleep are the ranks of the dead. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, under the one the blue, under the other the gray. These in the robings of glory, those in the gloom of defeat, all with the battle blood gory in the dusk of eternity meet. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, under the laurel, the blue, under the willow, the gray. From the silence of sorrowful hours, the desolate mourners go, lovingly laden with flowers, alike for the friend and the foe. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, under the roses, the blue, under the lilies, the gray. So with an equal splendor, the morning sun rays fall, with a touch impartially tender on the blossoms blooming for all. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, broidered with gold, the blue, mellowed with gold, the gray. So when the summer calleth on forest and field of grain, with an equal murmur falleth the cooling drip of the rain. Under the sod and dew, waiting the judgment day, wet with the rain, the blue, and wet with the rain, the gray. Sadly, but not upbraiding, the generous deed was done. In the storms of the years that are fading, no braver battle was won. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, under the blossoms, the blue, under the garlands, the gray. No more shall the war cry sever, or the winding rivers be red. They banish our anger forever when they laurel the graves of our dead. Under the sod and the dew, waiting the judgment day, love and tears for the blue, tears and love for the gray. So the publication of this poem, The Blue and the Gray by Finch, meant that by the end of 1867, the Southern Memorial Day holiday was familiar throughout the entire country. And General Logan was aware of these forgiving sentiments of people like Finch. And when Logan's order establishing Memorial Day was published in various newspapers in May of 1968, this poem, The Blue and the Gray, was sometimes added to the order. So it was not long before Northerners decided that they would not only adopt the Southern custom of Memorial Day, but also the Southern custom of burying the hatchet. A group of Union veterans explained their intentions in a letter to the Philadelphia Evening Telegraph This came out on May 28th, 1869, and it said, wishing to bury forever the harsh feelings engendered by the war, Post 19 has decided not to pass by the graves of the Confederates sleeping in our lines, but divide each year between the blue and the gray and the first floral offerings of a common country. We have no powerless foes. Post 19 thinks of the Southern dead only as brave men. So other reports of this type of kind forgiveness circulated in the North, including the gesture of a 10-year-old who made a wreath of flowers and sent it to Colonel Lemming in Lafayette, Indiana, with the following note attached. It said, will you please put this wreath upon some rebel soldier's grave? My dear Papa is buried at Andersonville, and perhaps some little girl will be kind enough to put a few flowers upon his grave. President Abraham Lincoln's wish that there be malice toward none and charity for all was visible in the actions of participants on both sides who extended an olive branch during these Memorial Day observances in those first 3 years. Although not known by many today, the early evolution of the Memorial Day holiday was a manifestation of Lincoln's hope for reconciliation between the North and the South. And before he became president, James Garfield was a Civil War general. He was a congressman, but he delivered a pretty lengthy speech at the first Memorial Day ceremony. Of course, and then it was still called Decoration Day. And at the time, as I said, he was a general and a congressman, not yet president. But on May 30th, 1868, he addressed the several thousand people gathered at Arlington National Cemetery, and this was his most remembered statement from that speech. If silence is ever golden, it must be beside the graves of 15,000 men whose lives were more significant than speech, and whose death was a poem the music of which can never be sung. Today, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has published an American Wars report, and that report is to estimate the number of fallen troops who died in battle from 1775 to 1991, and that number was 651,031. On Memorial Day today, there are approximately 260,000 graves at the Arlington National Cemetery, and today they are all decorated with American flags. One thing that I would like to suggest, if you're listening to this early enough in the day, when I worked with special operations for a number of years, I saw this done at every major meal function that I experienced with these people, and I've since taken this to my own family, and we do this on Christmas, Thanksgiving, 4th of July, Memorial Day, Veterans Day. We do this for a lot of holidays, and that is to set an extra place setting at the table that remains empty. A plate and the napkin and the knife and fork and spoon and the glass, but nobody sits there, and it remains empty, and that's a presence at our table. And this is something that the military does, but this is something we can also do as individuals. It's a presence at our table that we can explain to our children and grandchildren and be reminded ourselves that this represents the families that today, this evening, are sitting down to a meal without their mom or dad, or without their grandfather or grandmother, because that person gave their lives in defense of our country. And so to have that visible reminder for our children, for our families, that yes, while we're all here, there are other families that don't have their dad or mom because they've fought to allow us the freedom to do this. And we want to remember them. And this is how we remember them. So just an idea for you. And I want you to have not a happy Memorial Day, but a contemplative one. I want you to have a good time. I want you to be with your family. But let's remember. Okay? All right. I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme, written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Fireworks for the cast and crew, provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by oddfoodcombos.com. Friend, can you imagine the culinary excitement the first time chocolate was paired with peanut butter? They didn't seem to match, but look at them now. The two are virtually inseparable. And there have been more success stories. Cheese and eggs, caramel and sea salt, mashed potatoes and gravy, and of course, more recently, fried chicken and waffles. Now, with a subscription to oddfoodcombos.com, you'll receive a twice-weekly emailed suggestion of a new and unique food pairing that is likely to put you ahead in the culinary cool category among your friends. With photographs, you'll receive suggestions like grapes and grits, peanut butter and pot roast, pickled herring milkshakes, anchovy chip cookies, grapefruit juice and milk, lima bean lasagna, and liver ice cream. So join today. We are oddfoodcombos.com, a division of Poulan Clairol, manufacturer of chainsaws and fine hair care products.